This is SignMyCar. I'm Severine Dehaan. Did you know that some parts of Wisconsin still hang on to the Belgian heritage? In the Door Peninsula, many towns are named after Belgian cities. In this interview, you will meet Sandy Orsted, treasurer at the Belgian Heritage Center. Sandy will tell you all about how an upsetting event turned out to be a real wake-up call for the Belgian community. Ever since, the community has been organizing to professionally preserve their Walloon heritage and save their language. Here it goes.
My name is Sandy Orsted. That's my married name. My maiden name is Lamper, which is obviously a Belgian name, and I'm the treasurer of the Belgian Heritage Center.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your Belgian heritage?
There's always been in the community a lot of emphasis on heritage that I just don't think ever dissipated from the original immigrants. You know, they always just kind of hung onto their language, hung onto their traditions. Like my dad, his Belgian heritage was very important to him. And, you know, he got that from his parents and their parents. I mean, it's always kind of been handed down. And you never notice the same kind of emphasis from other ethnic groups in the area. They just didn't do that.
You said, I remember in our phone conversation, you had mentioned that your father could understand Walloon, but it was looked down when the Walloon language was spoken. Can you tell me a little bit more?
What happened was, you know, a lot of families, it was like extended families, you know, it was mom and dad, but grandma, grandpa, and the kids. And so what would happen is that the older people didn't speak English. Some of the parents spoke some better than others. And so the kids didn't learn English until they went to school in a lot of cases. And that's what happened with my dad. He didn't speak any English until he went to school because he had his grandparents living in the house. And that was a fairly common thing. And so what would happen is that they'd go to school and they'd be around the other kids who did speak English. And of course, imagine trying to learn to read and write in a language you've never spoken. So they're just way behind the other students. So they didn't always feel good about themselves. The teachers didn't want them speaking Walloon. Teachers couldn't understand what they were saying. So, I mean, I think there was this connotation of it being a negative thing at that time, or at least people were made to feel like, you know, they were somehow backwards, for lack of a better word, because they were speaking that language. So there was a lot that kind of made people feel like that. But once they got out of school, that was the language they spoke. I mean, to the day my dad died, Walloon was his first language when he was speaking to any of his relatives.
Which generation are you? Are you generation 5 or 6?
Let's see. So I count myself as one, right? And so there's me, then there's my dad, his dad, and then there's Charles and Nestor. So 5.
You have a 5th generation American. Do you know a little bit more about your great-great-father or mother?
I can't say her last name, but Seraphine was her first name. And she was the one who walked from Nemours, or that area, all the way to Menasha to make the claim, the homesteading claim for the land that my family started on. And she was also one of the people that they talk about in this book, Walloons in Wisconsin, that her story was that she had a sandwich that she took, and I can't even imagine this. I mean, you're walking all that distance with 50 pounds of wheat, and you have a sandwich for the whole day. And in her case, she was challenged by wolves, and so she had to throw him her sandwich in order to scare him off, and then she had the sandwich. And it's you know, it really makes you think, you know, wow, we come from some very hardy stock, you know, women especially, who are tough. And that's I think the thing I like the most about looking at my heritage, because it's not just her, it's that a lot of the women in our family they're tough people, hardworking, you know, that kind of thing.
It must be very inspiring too.
It is. And I'm glad that this is why it was really kind of good to get involved in the Belgian Heritage Center, because I've probably heard these things at one point or another in my life, but like a lot of people, you know, what your parents tell you doesn't stick all the time. And now, you know, you start seeing it documented, you start hearing the stories, you start hearing that, you know, there were all kinds of women that were doing this. And it's fascinating to think about what their lives were like.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how the Belgian Heritage Center started?
In 2000, St. Mary of the Snows Church was decommissioned by the Catholic Diocese. And that was kind of a major event because church is like the central social connector of the community, especially within the Belgian community. I think that's just, I mean, there's no separating church and family and community. I mean, it's all one thing for most of us. And so they closed the church with the idea that at some point the Norbertines, who were founded in that church, that they were going to take over the church and turn it into some kind of museum and that the church would stay. But in 2010, the church had sat empty for 10 years. It was becoming a drain on the resources of the local parish that had to support it. And so they were going to tear it down. That got the community engaged in, first of all, saving the church, but then what are we going to do with it? And the what are we going to do with it was the part about preserving our heritage in a professional manner, in a professionally curated museum exhibits, this kind of thing. And we've said many times that in a way, as much as we were upset about the idea that they might demolish the church, it was actually a good thing in the sense that had we waited too much longer to get started on this, some of our older community members would not be around to ask questions about the history anymore. There are still plenty of Walloon speakers who can tell the language. There are still people who can identify the photos, who know the stories but if we wait another 10 years, how much of that's going to be lost?
Right now, we fast forward 6 years since you acquired the church. Can you tell me a little bit more about what are your missions and what are your priorities and vision for the future?
The primary mission is to preserve the Belgian culture and to tell the story of the original settlers. We have kind of two components. One is the traditions. We do a waffle breakfast every year. We do a bouillon lunch every year. Kermesses, other annual traditions or community type involvement. And then the second part is telling the story of the settlers, but also promoting it so that other future generations of Belgians can be proud of their heritage because they have something to refer to. So that's our professionally developed exhibits that we're just getting started on right now.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you envision for this interactive exhibition?
Yeah, well, the back of the church, we've been calling them the static exhibits, but they've been built with placeholders for at least 3 interactive stations. One example of what we want to do is take the Belgian settlement map and find maybe 5-10 families that we can trace from the land ownership today all the way back to the original settlers. And what was the story? What's the land? Who's there now? How did they get here? What were the other relationships, marriages and things like that, that kind of the story of that person. And what we'd like to show is there are all kinds of places on the map where we trace our history all the way back to the original immigrants.
What has been the reception from the younger generation to the mission of the Belgian Heritage Center?
I don't think we've seen that yet. I mean, I'm 56 and I'm the young one, it's which is a nice feeling for me. But I mean, that says an awful lot when you look at a lot of the volunteers. Just like you say, you don't see many people under 50. You really don't. And so what we've been talking about is how do we change that? What do we do to make this more appealing to the younger generations? And so we've talked about how do we get to the schools? And so for example, can we develop a curricula? Can we develop a day camp type scenario where kids come in, say for a day in the summer, and they learn a little bit about the language, a little bit about the history, maybe cook some food or, this kind of thing. That's kind of an outreach effort that I think we need to make once we have something that is a little more tangible to support that learning. Because without that, it dies. There are a lot of people, I think my age and older, that realize that something's going to be lost if we can't interest the younger people in it. And so I think there will be interest, say, by parents and grandparents to send their kids and try to tell the story a little bit more effectively themselves. Because if all they do is tell stories, that's nice. But if you can show people visually and give them, like some of these interactive tools, the stuff that Kelly's working on, all of those are going to be way more appealing than, just I mean, stories are good, but they need a little bit of
curating.
Yeah, exactly.
Where can people find more about you and follow you as you grow as an organization?
Our website is pretty good. It's BelgianHeritageCenter.org, and we try to keep. We've got a homepage section there that's talking about events and what's coming, and we try to keep that pretty current with what's going on. We also have a Facebook page where we promote more events and just kind of the cultural side of things. But if anybody's interested in visiting, starting probably by the middle of May, I would say we'll be open again, at least on weekends and maybe part of the week. We have to kind of see what the traffic is like.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for having me at your home and for giving me this awesome interview.
You're very welcome. Thrilled to have you.
We have to sign the car.
We have to sign the car? Okay, in pink.
In pink. Thank you for listening to this SignMyCar interview. To find out more multimedia stories on Belgians living in the US, just go to our website on www.signmycar.org. If you like our work and would like to see more stories and more documentaries, please consider making a donation on our GoFundMe page. You will find the link on our website. Have a great day!